he said, my mother would call you an effing mooly. And he said that to me, and I looked at him, and before I knew it, I said to him, well, I would have called your mother an OB. Or he had a copy of his resume, and he said, you see the resume? I said, yes. He said, that's who I compete against. He said, the better this piece of paper becomes, the better I have to become. And in that moment, I took my career development, my career management into my own hands. I stopped, if you will, depending on others or expecting others to contribute to that in some way.
All right. We're back. This is season 2 of So Your Boss Sucks. Now what? I'm Natalie Parker, and I'm your host. I'm excited today because I am here with my friend, my homie for 20 plus years, the Mr. DeVaughn Stevens. Hello, DeVaughn.
Hello, Miss Parker. How are you?
I'm excited because not only is he my friend, but he's also my brother, having gone to Morehouse, me going to Bennett,
Yes.
fellow partner in the HR trenches. So we're going to talk all about HR this entire season. And I'm excited to have you. Why don't you share with us, let's talk about your first really bad job.
My first really bad job. Well, first, thank you for having me. I appreciate this. As you know, this is my first time doing something like this. So
He's going to kill me later.
Totally outside of my comfort zone, but anything for my friend, my sister, correct?
Oh, yes.
So my first terrible job. I would probably argue that I haven't had many terrible jobs. I've had some really good learning experiences from some terrible moments on the job.
Okay.
And I think probably one of my first ones was graduating college, had gone home for a year, and then got what I call my real job, started my career in HR in the summer of 2001, when I met you for the first time, actually. Mm-hmm. And I was working for a gentleman whom was very colorful, had a very dynamic character about him, a lot of personality. I remember he would always give me a hard time. I used to call him my tour mentor, if you will, as a spin on being a mentor. And
your tour mentor.
Yes, he would torment me on purpose, just
like trial by fire.
Trial by fire. He wanted a reaction.
What was the job, though? What was the?
I was in a corporate leadership development program in the human resources function. It was a rotational, meaning I was to spend a year in each of my assignments. So this particular year was my first year. It was in labor relations. It was in South Jersey. I had relocated from the Midwest. And so I was long ways from home in an area unfamiliar to me. Didn't know anyone. I had the benefit, though, of my best friend being over the river in Philadelphia. So that was some comfort. But I was new and learning how to live on my own, manage, pay bills, be responsible, be an adult. And so here I am in this man's office, and he is giving me my first terrible moment. And he's saying, my mother would probably call you an effing mooly.
Oh, no.
And I'm looking at him.
He said that.
He said it to me.
In the office?
In the office.
Not in the parking lot?
No.
Okay.
We were at work. We were in the workplace.
Say it. He said, say this again.
He said, my mother would call you an effing mooly. And I did not know what that was. I later learned, I guess it has some associations with an eggplant and the color black and things like that. So
So he was Italian?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe old school Italian.
Okay.
And he said that to me, and I looked at him. And before I knew it, I said to him, well, I would have called your mother an OB. And he just looked at me.
But wait a minute, y'all are both in HR,
Mm-hmm.
just exchanging slurs.
Yes, at that moment.
Don't do this at home, children.
No, I don't encourage it. But at that moment, I think that I was not paying attention to the fact that we worked in human resources. I was paying attention to the fact that this man just called me out of my name. And the shock and the disrespect, I think, took me off guard. And so I think there was this a reaction. And I realized that that's a lot of what he would do. He would do those little triggers just to get a reaction out of me. I think it entertained him in some ways. Until eventually one night, I remember I left work mad at him around 6:00 or something. I left work and I went home and I literally sat on my couch in front of the TV. I never turned the TV on, and I sat there fuming mad. I think I probably cursed him and said all kind of things and was ready to quit and go home.
He said worse things than the bully thing?
I'm sure.
Do you remember what he said to send you in this space where you're just sitting in front of him?
I think he probably said something questioning my capability or my work or something like that. I'm not quite sure. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times he would often be more character, assassination type things, or just being nasty just cause, and I think, like I said, it was to get a rise out of it.
Yeah.
I remember sitting on that couch mad. And then eventually somewhere around 10:30, 11 o'clock, I said, why am I sitting on this couch mad by myself? If he's at home and he told me he would drink a glass of red wine every night. Mm-hmm. I said, he's probably drank his glass of red wine, enjoyed his family and going to bed peacefully. Why am I mad? And I don't have anybody else to be mad with me. I need some company if I'm going to be mad, because it's no fun doing this by yourself. Let's commiserate. And so I realized that I'm not going to let him get me anymore. I'm not going to let him trigger me or get those rises out of me anymore. And so I kind of learned how to just look at him and either say nothing or smile when he would start cutting up.
So why didn't you report him? Why didn't you go tell somebody else, he's so out of pocket?
That's a good question. I think being young in my career, being away from home, I think I did not want to risk losing my job by, reporting him. And also relationships mattered to me. And as much as he would do little things to nitpick or agitate me, as much as he would do other things to teach me and expose me to things. I remember one time that he took a colleague and I to New York City, took us to the Statue of Liberty, and he took me to my first dinner with live opera singing. And I think I had been exposed to different types of food, calamari. First time I ever had bruschetta and all those types of things. And whenever we would deal with, because this was a labor relations rotation, when we would deal with the union, he made it a point to give me space and place to be seen and to be heard. And so I think I tended to overlook or minimize those moments where he was doing what he would be doing just to pick at me and,
tick you off.
Yeah, tick me off for his own probably self-enjoyment.
But do you think, because labor relations can be a bit of a tough role, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think some of that was to toughen you up because you did have to deal with the labor union?
Probably so. And I can imagine that being the case, because a lot of times you do end up in some very contentious, confrontational type moments with management and union, particularly when you disagree on contractual terms or different actions that may have been taken. But I had also grown up in a blue-collar unionized town. I grew up in the Midwest. So I grew up in the Metro Detroit area and in UAW families. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like I was unfamiliar with that. I watched my grandparents and other members of my family get up and go into plants and factories to build cars and so forth on a daily basis. So I understood that side. I probably didn't understand the side of being on the management team, though, right?
Yeah.
So it may have been part of helping me build the toughen my skin,
Yeah.
a little bit. But I never asked him why.
Would you go back and ask? Because you're not talking, I've shared my stories with everyone here, and there are still some people that, I'm glad that I survived it. And if I saw them on the street, while I wouldn't push them in front of a car, I don't know that I would have the grace to be like, hey, how you doing? Right. But you don't seem to have that animus. And we talk about this. I probably, if you read the Bible, I'm probably more like Peter. You say something to me, I'm cutting your ear off. You are definitely more of a peacemaker than I am.
I think for the most part, there were moments where he showed me more of kindness or care and concern. I think he just had a rough around the edge way about doing it.
Yeah.
And so.
And we're talking 20 years ago.
Right.
This is not now.
24 technically.
Don't talk to you. Ain't have to say all that. Nobody asked you that.
Listen. It hit me this year. I was like, wow, I've been doing this a long time. But I think a lot of it also goes to how I was brought up. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and my mom, they were very intentional about exposing me and my brother and my cousins to different walks of life, right? Sure, we were blue collar. We grew up in quote unquote the inner city, urban area and so forth. And you can take all of the stereotypes and characterizations you want to put on that as you will. But my family was very intentional about exposing us to all types of people. We, with community service, we did a lot of community service as children. My mom's godmother, part of her parish, her Catholic parish, ran a soup kitchen. And so we had to volunteer and serve the homeless. We had to help pack Christmas gifts and, and we were part of Upward Bound programs. And my particular Upward Bound, we were on a boarding school campus. So I was exposed, from the I guess lower class to the upper class, however you want to characterize those social classes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't quick to just judge, but I was not a fool to not pay attention to how people treated you. My grandmother also taught me it doesn't take but 2 seconds, 2 and 2, to realize, a person sometimes. And so I paid attention to those things. And then I also learned how to navigate and maneuver accordingly, so that we could still have the relationship and interactions that we needed to have.
I think there's 2 things that came to mind for me that you said that I think is important. One is, you mentioned it twice, you value relationships. And so that typically dictates how you respond in situations, which I don't know, for me, sometimes I'm ready to blow up the bridge and I'm okay with it. But, and maybe people are like you where you're like, no, I value the relationship. But I think the other thing that's really commendable is your ability to see the thread of doing soup kitchen work and bringing some of the value into a really difficult situation. And I think a lot of times when we're in really bad leadership situations with people, that we don't look at the arc of our life to say, what are the tools that we can bring into the situation to help us navigate, survive, and thrive? I appreciate that.
Yeah, I've always kind of realized that sometimes, the behaviors you see in another person, you never know. You may exhibit them one day yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to just be a little mindful of how I come across, because I think in knowing myself, if that button gets pushed, because I'm a very much a compartmentalizer and a suppression type person,
mm-hmm.
In order for me to keep moving and keep going, and I know that if you push that button, whatever happened 2, 3 years ago, weeks ago, months ago, is going to come right up in this moment. And by the time we finish, one of us won't be walking out, and I plan to walk out. So we have to be not only mindful of the other, but be aware of who you are too.
Yeah.
And so or be aware of what your triggers might be. So I think I've tried to pay attention to those things as I've grown up, because as a kid, I probably would have been a little bit more explosive. And I probably would have, as they say, set you straight right where you stood. But
the kids say now, stand on business.
And that business would have been firm with me. You understand what I'm saying? But I would have, paying attention to the fact that now, hey, you're not a kid anymore. I'm an adult. I'm in a professional setting. And my conduct, I think, needs to, should reflect that.
And I think that's really, sometimes people forget that it's work, right? And how you present is a direct reflection on you. People may never see how the leader acts.
Right.
So we've taken kind of account, you and I, right? If we laid our cards together, I'm almost certain you had at least 3 or 4 worse leaders than me. Right. In the arc of your career, you've had some really interesting exchanges. Like, walk us through kind of high level, like what were some of those scenarios and how did you kind of with each level? Because you've risen in your career well from, being in the leadership development program to being an executive. Right. So, I mean, and at every level, you've had some kind of challenge.
Absolutely. I think when I look at my career, a lot of the assignments that I've had, and not just the work or the task part of those assignments, but the management relationships have been trial by fire. And I have been burned, gotten some burns, and been able to heal from them along the way. I think one of my if you will, worst management experiences actually was probably one of my most teachable moments for me. I remember having a manager that was very standoffish, not very communicative, not very advisory, and it just was a difficult relationship. And I remember going in and asking for a salary revision. And I went to the individual and said, hey, I don't think that my salary is aligned with the scope of the role that I have. The role that I have is a lot bigger than what I'm being paid. And so I would, respectfully like to have my salary reconsidered.
And did you come with all of the evidence of like, here's what I'm doing now, list?
Absolutely. And he himself knew it.
Yeah.
He because we went from a team of, I think there may have been 3 or 4, including myself, on the business partner team, down to just 2. It was the lead manager, him, and then me. And I'm covering all of this. That included handling all the functional work with staffing, with comp, with EEO diversity, AAP work.
It was a lot. It was a big job.
A lot. As well as having a small union to also interface with. And so it was a lot of work. And I just felt like my pay was not reflective of that. It didn't align with what I, thought the market was paying for what the caliber work I was performing.
Which, as an HR professional, it is our job to know that.
I think we intuitively know it because we deal with, if there's nothing we're going to deal with on a daily basis, it's someone coming in talking about pay, whether they were paid improperly, properly, timely, untimely, what have you. It's always, there's always a pay issue coming. But I remember doing that. He came back to me. He was very clear. He said, this is the job that I have, and the pay that you're making is what I'm paying for it. Like it or love it, it is what it is.
Oh, okay.
That was it. I said, okay. He then went forward in our conversation, and he said, you see this resume? I think he had brought a copy of his resume. or he had a copy of his resume. And he said, "You see the resume?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's who I compete against." He said, "The better this piece of paper becomes, the better I have to become." And in that moment, I took my career development, my career management into my own hands. I stopped, if you will, depending on others or expecting others to contribute to that in some way. And I started to realize that the dependence, I needed to change that to using them as resources, not as sources of what I was doing in my career, whether it was my pay or my assignments and so forth. And so I kept my nose to the grind. I was completing my master's, I think, during that time. I knew that the company had a payback requirement. I called the tuition assistance program, found out when was the last day that I would be responsible or held accountable for paying back anything associated with my master's degree. And when I finished my master's and got past that date, I was actively interviewing. I found a new position and I effectively resigned. And then I went from there.
Listen, I'm not mad at you. At the end of the day, you've got to own your career. And with organizations being where they are, as much as we want to believe they're merit-based, they're also usually not looking to just give away money, right? And so, And so, one, you advocated. Two, you put, having, and I told this story. I think I told this story to this group about how I was denied a good performance rating, and I brought in like this whole manual of all the things I did. Like, now tell me how I didn't deserve more, right? And so, going armed with data, and I tell the team every time, like I tell a group every time, like document everything, because you're your best defense when things fall apart. It's just important.
And I'll tell you that even with to your point of document everything, it has taken me years to get to that point. I had to learn how to create a special email file to push those things to the side so I could have a quick access to the records, because before I did not, it took me a long time to say, you need to catalog that stuff, and I didn't do it. And then when it came time for performance review time, I'm scrambling, going through everything, trying to find the evidence or, reference back to this date or this moment and things of that nature. So we have to be deliberate. Be as deliberate with yourself as you are with others, and I think that's one of the things that I've learned with HR. We, as HR professionals, will take better care of others. We'll coach and counsel and engineering and finance and all the other functional groups and businesses that we support. But when it comes for us, we are not good at it. Yeah. We don't give ourselves the same advice and the same coaching and counseling. And so I've had to learn how to do that along those years. And so, good point.
That's fair. That's fair. It's hard as a caregiver of people in an organization. You do have to put the oxygen mask on yourself. Let's talk about your role as an HR leader. So you've seen hundreds of employees in different industries come in and out of your office. When you think about like the number one complaint that people have about their leader, what's the theme you see? What's the like the top three?
Typically, it has been around in top three. So I won't rank the three. I'll just cluster them. There's typically an element of race. There's an element of sex. And then there is just an element of dislike or that disrespect.
Okay.
And so I have seen where, a person may come in and say, well, I feel that I'm being picked on, or my performance review was not good. And of course, it may be because, I'm the only female on the team. They give all of the roles to the young guys or to the young white guys, or they only cater to this group, or I hang out with this friend or that friend, or something to that effect, or I don't socialize after work. And
so that excludes you.
And so now I'm being excluded and disrespected and things of that nature. It is what I have learned not to do, which I think initially was probably the first reaction, was to argue their perception of their experience.
Say that one more time. You've learned not to
argue their perception of their experience because they're coming in telling me this is how I have perceived how I've been treated. This is my reality. And I think when I first started early in my career, being young, probably a little immature, a little naive, I was trying to argue that down, trying to dismiss it or minimize it in some way, because I think I would feel, you could feel the hurt or the whatever discomfort they felt, and I'm trying to no, maybe that's not what they meant, and here I am trying to think for this manager. And I started to realize I can't think for them. I don't know what they were thinking in that moment, no more than I can think for you and how you feel and how you've been treated. And so I learned to listen, and I learned to coach or give some tips and tools on how they can go back and address it. And one of the tips that I typically give is be very upfront, be very clear, be very direct and assertive about how to tell them how to treat you and how you respond to certain things. And so if they are typically someone who yells and maybe their yelling has this aggressive bent to it, be very clear with them that you don't respond well to that type of, tone and tenor and that type of communication style. You shut off from that, because when they now have that awareness, but yet they persistently or consistently keep doing it, then I think we have a problem. And I also think sometimes when you don't give a person an opportunity, when you don't tell them no or tell them stop or something like that, they don't know. They'll keep doing what they don't know not to do.
It's funny you should say that, because a lot of people stay silent. So I'm back at your first story where you're like, I didn't say a whole lot of things to the guy who was calling me all these little slurs. But now your position and your role coaching others is like, no, speak up, right? Say something. I think most people don't speak up because they don't know how. They don't know how to do it without an impassioned, emboldened, diatribe that makes them feel like they're about to be on, the last scene of glory.
I'd like to believe that. I used to believe that they didn't know how. People know how to speak up for themselves. As we talked about pay being, an issue, that whenever your pay is a problem, you speak up very clearly. So if you can speak up for your pay, you can speak up when someone has offended you or taken a step too far in your boundaries or whatever that they may have crossed with you. Speak up. Silence perpetuates issues. So you can't keep silent and then expect somebody to automatically change because they didn't hear you say that this didn't feel good or that you did something wrong to them or you felt uncomfortable. But the moment that they hear it and you know that you've been very clear, now they're accountable for it.
So, but what do you say? Because you said the 3 top issues you saw were race, sex, and being excluded or disrespected in some kind. To me, all of those situations are majority minority. Mm-hmm. In some way, shape, or form. Like, I am not with them. I have some level of otherness that puts me outside of the sanctum of being in the cool kids, if you will. Mm-hmm. So what do you say to the person who's maybe done some of that, but either they're being deflected or people are pretending it's not the problem? Like, so if I know that you've got cronyism or nepotism and I didn't get a job, because it's hard to prove.
Let's assume that an HR professional or a company did the good faith, investigated, and addressed the issue, and took some corrective action. But let's assume that the person or the issue didn't change, right? And it's just persistent, because sometimes these organizational cultures are so thick and so legacy it is hard to break them, and they're not going to break overnight, may not even break in a year. You have to realize that you don't have to stay in that. And I think a lot of times people stay in these situations because, one, they don't want to put forth the effort to go look for something new, because that requires effort and time and energy and things of that nature, and taking the risk too, right? But you know, it's a choice to be in the organization. It's a choice to be here. So sometimes the best thing for yourself is to remove yourself. So leave. Just like you accepted the offer, resign.
So it's funny because we talk often about when to tell people when to pull the ripcord, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when's the time for you to leave? Not over petty differences, not over, you know, the fact that you didn't get your way in a meeting, but when it's harming you psychologically or emotionally, right? You left because of the whole pay situation. Have you ever stayed somewhere too long? Like, you know what? I stayed too long.
Actually, yes. I think I have, I've had a couple, maybe two moments that I can think of in my career where I felt like I stayed too long.
And what was, hindsight being 2020, what were the 2 or 3 indicators that it was like too long?
Well, the first thing was, and I don't want, but it took me a moment to first realize what was my purpose in being in this particular assignment.
Say it again. That's good.
I had to figure out my purpose. Why did I choose to accept this offer, relocate my entire life, come to this state, this place, this company, and do this work with this group? And once I realized what that purpose was, then it was then time to realize, well, what were the prospective things or actions that I was supposed to take, or accomplishments or whatever, achievements that I needed to make, and then say, okay, it's time to go and exit. And in this particular case, I think I realized that my purpose in that assignment was to develop others, was to give to others what I had gotten over the years, the goodness of what I had gotten. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a strengths-based type of person, so I will leverage your strengths to help build you. And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to anchor on where your quote unquote weaknesses are or areas of development. I think if I highlight your strengths, then we can overcome those other areas, and you can perform and do well. Mm-hmm. And so I had, I think my purpose was to develop the team members. And so there was one where they needed some credentials, and I needed to support them as they gained their credentials. They were in a position, and I remember saying to them, look, for the profile of this job and what you're bringing to the table, there's a mismatch. We need to get you some credentials so that if you ever decide to leave here or even grow in this organization, when you put your paper on the street in the market, your credentials and your work will all line up. Mm-hmm. And it will be easy. You won't get dismissed because you don't have the education, or you won't get dismissed because you don't have quote unquote years of experience in something like that.
And you stayed trying to get the person.
To get that person, get another, move them along in their career, get them experiences.
What did that cost you though? Because that's a lot of energy. I mean, you're getting your paycheck, don't get me wrong. Yeah. And as a leader, you should be helping your team. But you knew it was time to go.
I did. As a matter of fact, I knew it was time to go probably 2 years before the actual time to leave came. But I said, I'm going to stay through these next 2 years. And what happened is one of the individuals, I think I may have become even too vested in their development too. But one of the individuals made a decision that I didn't necessarily see coming. And at the time that they made that decision, I should have said, okay, DeVaughn, now you've done what you were supposed to do. You have satisfied this purpose. Now you need to start looking for your opportunity to exit out. But I also had a particularly at this time, a actual good boss, who would say things and do things to convince me to stay. Gave retention bonuses, gave promotions, gave good increases, gave good assignments and tasks. And so I think I got conflicted with that, and my own.
Perfect. Like your next
That's
purpose.
correct.
And I think that's really important to say, because a lot of times organizations, especially if you have potential, if you're considered a high potential, if you're considered a valuable key player in your organization, will do things to pacify and satiate you, right? Whether that's, degrees or certificates and training and all of that's good. But the real question is, are you growing? And is this the best thing for you? Right? Because they can continue to kind of, sedate you into a comfort because they love you and they need you. But is that the best thing for you?
It's a good question. And I am the product of baby boomers, loyalist. And so, it was get an education, get a good job, stay at that company, retire, collect your pension and things of that nature. But I'm also that first generation. I think that started to break away from that.
Yeah, but you and I still probably have more tenure in most of our second and third and fourth jobs than most people, right? So I talk about this in the last speeches. We grow up and it said, get good grades, go to college, and get a job, not a purpose, not anything else, right? The job was the thing you get.
That's it.
And you ride it out until the wheels fall off. Right. And it's nothing for us to have seen people and come in when we came into the workforce. I bet you that first guy was in there 25, 30 years. Right. That was really a lot for us to see. But now the average tenure in any company is like 3.8 years, according to the Department of Labor Statistics.
2 if you're lucky.
And I don't even understand how you get depth with that. Right. Like, I mean, how do you get depth in a skill set with just 2 years? Right. I think you've got it. It takes 1 year to learn it, another year to try to change it, and another year after that to see what the change happened, right?
Yes.
But
I think a lot of times, when you're being recruited out, the carrots are always a lot more tastier and a lot more shiny and everything when they're in front of you. And so, whereas you spent 2, maybe 3 years at one company, they've done all the training, the investment, and so forth. The new company now gets the benefit of all of that. And all I have to do is give you the actual task. You can write the codes. You can engineer the assignment. You can HR your way out of a situation now. It's just a different environment.
No, but part of that, I think we saw it when we were coming up too, where employers would see people, give them more accountabilities and not give them the pay. Right. So I'm giving you a whole extra job or a whole extra accountability that's more significant than like just this one extra task.
But
right.
Your performance and your skill and your proficiency didn't lack.
Yeah. But my point is, how many times did you see where it's like, oh, so-and-so's been in this job and, they're below midpoint by, 7-8%. And we want to give that, we don't give 10% increases, but they deserve 10% increases in contrast to all of their peers, because the companies aren't willing to do those shifts and changes to keep the talent.
Correct. And so I think, again, that goes to where the former mentality was, I'll just stay and suffer through that. Right. Whereas today, no. Thankfully, I've gotten the education, the training, the certificates, and some skills in these first year or 2. And now when X company comes out and they're going to give me not only the 10%, but a 15% bonus coming with it. Oh, I'm leaving.
But don't we just create a workforce of mercenaries? Just everybody just kind of prostituting it out here for next check?
You do, which is why I think for me, what I have done in the last 10 years of my career is I've really been a promoter of getting the return on your investment. So particularly in the role where I have been, the head of HR, I have told my management team, look, we're the company that has invested in this person to get these skills, to be able to do this, to run this machine, or to engineer this process, or to design this or formulate that. I wouldn't give that up easily. And guess what? We can give them 10% because if I go recruit out, I'm gonna pay 20% more for a new recruit whom you don't know their background, or you don't.
And it's going to cost you more to recruit them.
You're going to trust what they tell you in an interview and what you read on paper, and we have to believe that that'll show up at work.
It's better to have the devil you know than the devil you don't.
That is very true.
So head of HR, I want you to put on your futurist hat, because one of the things that's happening now, right? So we had the great resignation. The great resignation. Then we had quiet quitting, right? That was like a big thing. Like nobody ever quiet quit before. Anyway, it was a whole bunch of people that quiet quit in the 2000s, 2010s.
Listen. I did some quiet quitting in the in the mid 2000s. I think when it was time for me to make some exits. Now that you look at what the definition is or how to describe it, I think I did that.
So that being what it is, the new, a new trend that's happening is where organizations are starting to flatten their workforce, right?
Yes.
So Harvard Business Review had an article out talking about it. Recently, Amazon talked about the fact that they're going to get rid of like 13,000 managers. Last year, Meta did the same. As a leader of HR, having been in some really big companies, let's talk about this, because I have my own opinion, but I really want to hear from you. Like, what do you think that means, not only for the organization, but for the workforce?
Well, they just call it right sizing, right? We're just right sizing the organization, whatever that might mean, right? At the end of the day, it comes down. Yes, there may be some efficiency and proficiency that is generated from that, but it comes down to dollars and cents. It's money, it's cost.
Oh, right? Yeah. Amazon said it's going to be like $3.8 billion savings or something like that, which tells me like they just made repeated hiring. Anyway, go ahead. Like that's a lot of people all at the same time in a very short period of time.
It is a lot of people. And I think to me, that's where companies have to pay attention to what they say, because a lot of times companies will get up and they'll advocate, our people are first, our people our culture is people centric. We value our people. We have all kind of pontificated and hyperbole around people, but then we will make decisions that impact these people's livelihood and well-being, and we don't prepare or we don't help transition, and we just drop you off and dump you. Where's that same value? Where's that same priority? Where's that same culture that was supposed to be people-centric when it comes to that?
It's interesting you should say that. I had a client, they were like, oh, we're a family. And I'm like, well, what happens when you have to lay off the family? Like, it's basically like you're amputating a part of your organization.
Because family takes care of family, right?
That part. And I get it. A business is a business, and the business has to make money. And if it can't make money, then it's not profitable. So you might as well be a charity. I get it. Like, that's not lost to me. But I do think it's interesting how the pendulum is swinging from copious amounts of hierarchy to we're going to be as lean as we possibly can. It kind of reminds when we first came into the workforce, yes. Right? Like, the pendulum continues to switch back and forth. What do you think that's going to mean for the managers who stay and the employees that have to now be under this lean workforce?
I think that it's a fact of life, right? So I think we have to realize we have to stop acting like we've never been here before, right? I've seen this cycle throughout my entire career. So let's stop acting like we've never seen an exercise in staff reductions. We've never seen exercises in spans and layers.
Yeah, but you've got the Gen Zs new to the workforce, right? This is this first experience, but they've probably seen their parents and others, get reduced.
Welcome to the world of work.
I can't stand you.
Welcome to life. Welcome to reality.
So callous. Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's my thing, right? Everyone, you'll get this leaning of the workforce and the spans of control. The number of managers to employees will double and in some places triple. And that will become even more stressful for an already stressed out workforce. And when you think in the cycles of performance management, discipline, and all of that stuff, it'll go untamed. Because how can I be how do you even know I'm working on if you got 30 other people to consider?
I think, I'll say this. Look at a public school teacher who has probably 30, 40 students in a class.
It's not the same.
It's probably worse. And they have unruly children. They have more performance assessments and more behavioral issues than we have with civilized adults, right?
But typically, a teacher gives everyone in the room 30 assignments that are the same assignment. If I'm a program manager with 30 direct reports or a project manager with 30 direct reports, and I've got somebody working Scrum, I've got somebody working software, I've got somebody working everybody's working something different. Mm-hmm. I can't assess them the same.
So you trust them to do the job that you've hired them to do until you can.
How do I know what they're doing? That's part of the reason why the hierarchy is shrinking, because most of the people never knew what the people were doing.
Well, at the end of the day, everything has to come and meet a central point, right? So we're all contributing to some common goal.
What happens is the work gets delegated and it should get reintegrated back into a bigger goal.
Right. So how do you then, as the manager, if you have a goal to reach, you have a task, whatever that might be, how do you know if that task has been accomplished or that goal has been reached? Everybody has to do their part. If there's a missing part, you know where that missing part is.
So, all right, I'm going to say this again. In all of your work as an HR leader, you mean to tell me all of your managers knew what your people were doing?
They may not have known every down to the dotting the I, crossing the T, but you have enough of an awareness so that, because at the end of the day, remember, managers are looking out for themselves as well. They're trying to make sure that they're not getting caught up because you failed to do something, right? They're going to explain away why you failed to do something so they don't get caught up too. So they're going to make sure that things have to get done.
I don't think so. Maybe I don't have as much faith in humanity as you do. Listen, I want to hear from y'all. Listen, if you're listening to this on YouTube or find me on Instagram or Facebook, I want to know how many of you know that your manager has no clue of what you do. Like, even if you wrote your goals up right now, they would have no way to check it. They wouldn't even know how you do your work. I want to hear that. Like, because I've experienced some of that, not in some ways personally. And once I experienced it one time early in my career when I was working in Jersey, I was like, never again. And I made it a point to give my manager weekly reports of what I was doing. Because what you're not going to do is never know what I'm talking about so that you could talk about it to other people. So I made a point to inform my leader. But I have also witnessed firsthand in several different industries where managers like, yeah, I don't know what they do.
I think
people knew that they didn't know their manager didn't know what they did.
Personally, my managers have not necessarily, again, they've not known every specific detail, every movement, every individual action I've taken, but they've known enough of the high level to know, to having an awareness and an understanding so that if something did come back to them, they weren't caught off guard. Now, part of that to me is on the responsibility of the employee.
I agree.
You make, at least to your point, you were sending updates or something.
Weekly reports.
So that they at least do that. I've only had, I think maybe 2 managers, but one that I can remember where specifically I did that with this individual. And to be honest with you, I did it out of spite.
Wait a minute. Why were you being spiteful?
Because this individual, they wanted to come to me to tell me that I, hadn't done some things or what have you, only to realize, he actually did it very well. And now that manager's getting the glory for what I did.
That's happened.
So I said, since you want to act this way, let me show you what it really looks like. And so I made sure that they were very informed on a weekly basis, created a whole template so that they would see. And I emailed it to them on Fridays, I think either Friday afternoons or Friday evenings, as to what I accomplished that week. And eventually they got overwhelmed with that and they stopped asking and they stopped wanting it. And they started trusting me to do the job that they had hired me to do. You're paying me at a certain level. You're hiring me at a certain level. Trust me to manage. Trust me to lead.
I agree with you. And from an HR perspective, I know I have been working with directors and program managers who like, oh yeah, that's Bob, but I'm really not sure. And we've had to either discipline the leader or coach them, or because they weren't aware of what the person was doing. I expect that as we see this flattening, we're going to see a surfacing of leaders being overwhelmed in a season where they're already overwhelmed. It's possible. Right? Because we don't have, one of the things is when we were coming up, we had managers whose their only job was to manage. They weren't working managers. I have yet to come across many leaders who their only job is to lead, right? They have both a job and they have to manage the people. And I think they're going to continue to be overwhelmed. And that's going to cause the work environment, the culture, and even people's development opportunities to be stunted because they'll only reach for the people they know.
Isn't one of the arguments of flattening, we're going to streamline processes.
Oh, yeah, they want to be more agile.
Automate, we're going to be agile.
It's going to make communication trash.
Everything is going to be so much more easier to do, right?
That's what they think.
So if that's the case, then shouldn't it be easier to manage people?
I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. I don't agree. I think a guy named Elliot Jacks, who's really the father of organizational theory on hierarchy, right? Mm-hmm. His theory is any organization needs no more than 8 levels. If you have more than 8 levels, you have too many, because each level has a varying degree of accountability that adds difficulty.